A wealthy man sits across from a beggar, expecting gratitude for his generosity. But the beggar's haunting story of his past shatters all expectations, leaving the rich man stunned. What hidden truths connect their worlds? In the heart of a bustling metropolis, Harold Bennett is a name that commands attention. A multimillionaire known for his business empire, Harold owns everything from high-rise buildings to tech startups. But behind the doors of his lavish penthouse lies a man consumed by solitude. His vast wealth does little to fill the void left by his estranged family, and a tragic past he's long buried under layers of success. Harold's days are a repetitive blur of meetings, transactions, and hollow victories, with no one to share his accomplishments. On the other side of the city, Alan Turner sits quietly on a weathered bench outside a train station, clutching a tattered backpack. His face, worn by years of hardship, tells a story of survival. Once a promising young man with dreams of his own, Alan's life took a sharp turn, leading him to the streets. Each day, he struggles to scrape together enough for a meal, holding on to the remnants of his dignity. Unknown to both men, their paths are about to intersect in a way neither could have imagined. It all begins one cold winter evening when Harold decides to take a different route home from work. Traffic is gridlocked, and the city's usual noise feels unbearable. His driver suggests an alternate road through an older part of town. As they crawl through the narrow streets, Harold's eyes catch a man sitting alone on the pavement near a dimly lit diner. There's something about the figure that tugs at him, a quiet sadness that feels strangely familiar. Against his usual habits, Harold orders the car to stop. Stepping out of the warmth of his vehicle, Harold approaches the man, who looks up with guarded eyes. "Are you hungry?" Harold asks, gesturing toward the diner. Alan hesitates, unused to such offers. But hunger wins, and he nods. Inside the diner, the two men sit opposite each other at a small table. Alan eats slowly, savoring every bite, while Harold watches him with curiosity. Harold expects gratitude, maybe even a quick conversation about how he came to be here. What he doesn't expect is the story that unfolds, a story that begins with a shared name, a fateful choice, and a connection that will change both of their lives forever. As Alan places his fork down, he begins to speak in a quiet but steady voice. "You didn't have to do this for me," he says, his gaze fixed on the table. Not many people care enough to stop anymore. Harold, taken aback by the depth in Alan's tone, simply nods. Encouraged by the silence, Alan continues. He tells Harold that life hasn't always been this way. "I had a family once, a good job, and a home I was proud of. But sometimes, one bad decision, just one, can change everything." Intrigued, Harold leans in slightly, asking, "What happened?" Alan hesitates, but then begins to recount his story. He had been a successful craftsman, known for designing intricate woodwork that adorned the homes of the wealthy. But as the demand for his work dwindled and financial pressures mounted, Alan made a desperate investment in a business venture that turned out to be a scam. It wiped out his savings and left him drowning in debt. As his financial world crumbled, he lost his home, and worse, his family drifted away. Harold listens intently, feeling an inexplicable connection to Alan's words. For reasons he can't yet explain, Alan's story is striking a chord deep within him. As Alan's voice trails off, Harold finds himself reflecting on his own journey. Born into privilege, Harold had inherited his father's thriving business empire. But despite his financial head start, his life was far from perfect. He too had suffered losses, ones he rarely spoke about. Losing his younger brother Samuel in a car accident years ago had left a scar he'd never healed from. The memory of that day is a ghost that haunts Harold, and it shapes every cold and calculated decision he makes. What Alan doesn't know, as he speaks, is that Harold's interest in his story is more than just polite curiosity. There's something eerily familiar about the way Alan speaks of losing everything, of the despair that followed. Harold wonders if perhaps their worlds are not as far apart as they seem. he decides to probe further, asking Alan about his family. Alan hesitates, his eyes distant. "I had a son," he says, his voice heavy with emotion. "But I haven't seen him in years. He was just a boy when things started falling apart. If I could go back and fix things, I would. But life doesn't give you second chances, does it?" The conversation in the diner lingers in Harold's mind long after he returns to his quiet penthouse that evening. Alan's story feels unfinished, and for reasons Harold can't quite understand, he feels compelled to know more. He tells himself it's mere curiosity, but deep down, Harold knows there's something in Alan's story that resonates with his own life. The next day, Harold instructs his driver to take the same route home. As they approach the diner, he spots Alan on the same bench. This time, Harold doesn't hesitate. He steps out, offers Alan another meal, and they sit down together once more. Over steaming cups of coffee, Alan begins to open up further. He speaks about his son, a boy named Daniel, who would be a young man by now. Alan's face lights up when he talks about the laughter they once shared, but his expression darkens as he recounts the day he left. Alan's debt collectors had threatened his family's safety, and in his desperation, he had fled, hoping to protect them. Listening intently, Harold is struck by the parallels between Alan's choices and the sacrifices he himself had made in the name of success. Slowly, Harold begins to share pieces of his own story, a rare moment of vulnerability for the guarded businessman. As the conversations continue over the next few days, Harold finds himself drawn deeper into Alan's world. For the first time in years, Harold begins to break free from his rigid routine, making time to meet Alan and listen to his stories. It's during one of these meetings that Alan reveals a surprising detail. The city where Daniel had last lived is the same city where Harold's late brother, Samuel, had once run a struggling community shelter. This revelation sparks a flood of memories for Harold. He recalls Samuel's relentless optimism and his passion for helping others, even when their wealthy family saw his efforts as a waste of time. Samuel had always believed in second chances and had tried to instill that belief in Harold, though it had fallen on deaf ears. But now, sitting across from Alan, Harold begins to wonder if his brother's work might have impacted Alan's life in some unseen way. Driven by this possibility, Harold decides to investigate further. With Alan's reluctant permission, Harold starts using his connections to search for Daniel. At the same time, Harold begins to reflect on the walls he's built around himself, questioning whether his cold exterior has kept him from experiencing the kind of connection he sees in Alan's yearning for his son. Harold's investigation into Daniel's whereabouts proves to be more difficult than he anticipated. He enlists the help of a private investigator, Mr. Collins, who combs through public records, shelter databases, and social media. Days turn into weeks with little progress, and Harold begins to feel the weight of Alan's quiet hope. Despite his growing frustration, Harold refuses to give up. He's driven not only by a desire to help Alan, but by an unshakable sense that this journey is connected to his own need for redemption. Meanwhile, Harold and Alan's unlikely friendship deepens. Alan's resilience and optimism in the face of his hardships begin to challenge Harold's cynical worldview. During one of their conversations, Alan shares a story about the time he and Daniel built a treehouse together, a rare moment of joy before their lives unraveled. As he speaks, Harold can't help but imagine the kind of bond he might have had with his own brother if he'd been more open to Samuel's idealistic approach to life. Unbeknownst to both men, their lives are about to collide in ways they couldn't predict. On a rainy afternoon, Mr. Collins calls with news that could change everything. He's found a lead on Daniel, a lead that connects directly to Harold's past. The lead points to a youth outreach center on the city's outskirts, a place Harold hadn't thought about in years. It was one of the last projects Samuel had worked on before his tragic death, a center designed to give young people a safe haven and a second chance. Harold is stunned when Mr. Collins reveals that Daniel's name appears in the center's records, listed as a volunteer from several years ago. But there's more. Daniel had used the center as a mailing address for a brief period before disappearing again. Harold shares the news with Alan, who listens in stunned silence. The thought that his son might have been connected to a place built by someone so close to Harold feels almost too incredible to believe. Alan's voice trembles as he says, "If Samuel's work helped Daniel, even in a small way, then maybe, just maybe, my son found a little of the hope I couldn't give him." Motivated by this revelation, Harold decides to visit the center with Alan. It's a bittersweet trip for Harold, filled with memories of Samuel and the work he had once dismissed as naive. When they arrive, they meet a staff member who remembers Daniel, a detail that sets the stage for the emotional climax to come. Inside the outreach center, Harold and Alan are greeted by a warm and inviting staff member, Ms. Eleanor, who has worked there for over a decade. Eleanor's eyes light up at the mention of Daniel's name. She recalls a young man with a kind heart and a quiet demeanor who had volunteered at the center for a brief time. He was always helping others, even when it seemed like he needed help himself, she says, her voice tinged with sadness. Alan listens intently, hanging on to every word. For the first time in years, he feels a sense of closeness to his son, even if only through someone else's memories. Eleanor reveals that Daniel left the center abruptly but had been talking about reconnecting with someone from his past, someone who had left a lasting impression on him. Alan's heart aches at the possibility that his son may have been trying to find him. Before they leave, Eleanor hands Alan a faded letter she found in the center's archives. Addressed to no one in particular, the letter seems unfinished, but the handwriting is unmistakably Daniel's. As Alan reads, tears stream down his face. The letter speaks of regret, forgiveness, and a yearning to fix what was broken. Back in the car, Alan clutches the letter tightly, his emotions overwhelming him. Harold, sitting quietly beside him, finds himself moved in a way he hadn't anticipated. This moment, raw and unfiltered, reminds Harold of the final conversation he had with his brother Samuel. Samuel had pleaded with Harold to join him in his outreach work, saying, "We have the power to change lives, Harold. Don't let fear stop you from connecting with people." Harold had brushed it off back then, consumed by his ambition and the need to distance himself from his brother's ideals. Now, seeing Alan's vulnerability, Harold feels the weight of his own choices. He knows that helping Alan reconnect with Daniel isn't just about kindness. It's about honoring Samuel's legacy and confronting the emotional walls he's built around himself. Just as Harold is about to speak, his phone buzzes. It's a message from Mr. Collins with new information. A local cafe in a nearby neighborhood has a barista who matches Daniel's description and goes by the same name. The cafe is just a short drive away. Alan's hands tremble as he nods, silently urging Harold to take him there. As the car pulls away, both men brace themselves for what they might discover. The car ride to the cafe is tense, the air thick with anticipation. Alan fidgets with the letter in his hands, reading it over and over as if it holds the key to what's ahead. Harold, meanwhile, stares out the window, lost in thought. For the first time in years, he feels something stir within him, an unfamiliar blend of hope and fear. When they arrive, the cafe is bustling with activity. The warm aroma of coffee fills the air as Alan and Harold step inside. Alan scans the room frantically, his eyes darting from face to face. At first, there's no sign of Daniel, but then a voice calls out, "Next in line." Alan freezes. Behind the counter stands a young man who could only be his son. Daniel's features are unmistakable, the same piercing eyes and strong jawline Alan remembers from years ago. For a moment, Alan is rooted to the spot, his breath caught in his throat. Harold places a reassuring hand on Alan's shoulder, gently nudging him forward. With trembling steps, Alan approaches the counter. Daniel looks up, his polite smile faltering as recognition dawns on his face. Time seems to stand still as father and son lock eyes for the first time in over a decade. "Dad?" Daniel's voice is barely above a whisper, the single word carrying a lifetime of emotion. Alan nods, his voice failing him as tears stream down his face. The cafe seems to fade away, the noise of the bustling crowd replaced by the sound of their hearts pounding in unison. Daniel steps out from behind the counter, his expression a mixture of shock, relief, and apprehension. I didn't think I'd ever see you again, he says, his voice trembling. Alan takes a deep breath, his voice cracking as he says, I've been looking for you, son. I'm so sorry for everything, for leaving, for not being there when you needed me. Daniel hesitates, the years of pain and abandonment evident in his eyes. You left us, he says, his tone raw. Do you have any idea what that did to Mom? To me? Alan nods, his shoulders sagging under the weight of guilt. I do, he replies softly. And I've regretted it every single day. But I'm here now, Daniel. If there's any way to fix this, I want to try. Harold watches from a distance, the emotional exchange stirring something deep within him. He realizes that this moment isn't just about Alan and Daniel. It's about the healing power of connection and the courage to face one's past. The emotional tension in the cafe begins to ease as Daniel slowly lets his guard down. He invites Alan and Harold to sit with him during his break, though his demeanor remains cautious. Alan pours his heart out, sharing everything he has held back for years. His fear of endangering his family, his regret for leaving, and his unwavering hope that he might one day find Daniel. Daniel listens, his expression softening as Alan speaks. When Alan finishes, there's a long silence. Finally, Daniel says, It wasn't easy without you. But Mom always told me that you left because you thought it was the only way to protect us. His voice trembles as he adds, I was angry for a long time, but deep down, I never stopped hoping you'd come back. As the two men reconcile, Harold quietly observes, reflecting on his own journey. Alan and Daniel's reunion stirs memories of Samuel, his brother's unwavering belief in the power of forgiveness and second chances. Harold wonders if, in helping Alan, he has found a path to healing the wounds left by his own past. Before parting ways, Daniel agrees to meet Alan again soon, giving Alan a sense of hope he hasn't felt in years. That evening, Harold invites Alan back to his penthouse where they share a quiet dinner. Over the meal, Alan thanks Harold for his kindness, calling him a guardian angel, who appeared when he least expected it. Harold brushes off the compliment, but deep down, he knows this experience has changed him in profound ways. Alan expresses his hope to reconnect with Daniel more fully and rebuild their relationship step by step. Harold encourages him, drawing on lessons he's learned from his late brother. Samuel used to say that no matter how broken things seem, there's always a way to put them back together, Harold says, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. The conversation turns to Harold's own life. Alan urges him to visit the outreach center more often, suggesting it might help him feel closer to Samuel's legacy. Harold nods, realizing that it's time to step out of the shadow of his grief and embrace the ideals his brother stood for. By the end of the evening, both men feel a sense of peace. For Alan, it's the hope of a future with his son. For Harold, it's the realization that helping others might be the key to healing his own heart. In the following days, Harold takes Alan's advice to heart and revisits the outreach center. The once familiar halls, filled with photographs and murals of the young people Samuel had helped, bring back a flood of memories. Harold finds himself drawn to the quiet energy of the place, the laughter of children, the determination of volunteers, and the palpable sense of hope that Samuel had worked so hard to cultivate. During his visit, Harold meets with Ms. Eleanor again, who encourages him to get involved. She hands him a scrapbook filled with clippings and notes about the center's origins, many of which feature Samuel's vision for the project. As Harold flips through the pages, he feels an unexpected sense of pride and belonging. For the first time in years, he begins to see himself not just as a successful businessman, but as someone capable of carrying forward his brother's legacy. Meanwhile, Alan and Daniel slowly rebuild their relationship. Their first few meetings are awkward, marked by tentative conversations and unspoken pain. But as they spend more time together, their bond begins to mend. Daniel opens up about his struggles, and Alan listens intently, determined to make up for lost time. One afternoon, Daniel surprises Alan with an unexpected gesture. He invites him to meet some of his close friends at the cafe. Alan hesitates at first, feeling out of place among Daniel's new world, but Daniel insists. The gathering turns out to be a heartwarming experience. As Alan listens to Daniel's friends share stories of how Daniel helped them through their struggles, he begins to see the strength and compassion his son has developed over the years. Harold also begins to find his footing in the outreach work. He attends a fundraiser for the center, where he delivers an impromptu speech about the importance of second chances. Speaking about Samuel's vision and the impact it had on others, Harold feels a renewed sense of purpose. His words resonate deeply with the audience, many of whom approach him afterward to share their gratitude. As Harold and Alan's paths continue to intertwine, they both realize how much they've learned from each other. Alan's resilience and love for his son inspire Harold to reconnect with the world around him, while Harold's generosity and wisdom remind Alan that even the most broken relationships can be rebuilt with time and effort. Months pass, and the changes in Alan and Harold's lives become evident. Alan and Daniel's relationship has grown stronger, marked by frequent visits, shared meals, and heartfelt conversations. The wounds of the past haven't fully healed, but there's a newfound trust between father and son. Daniel begins to invite Alan into other parts of his life, from introducing him to his favorite hobbies to showing him the projects he's passionate about at the cafe. Meanwhile, Harold fully immerses himself in the outreach center. He launches a new initiative in Samuel's memory, aimed at providing scholarships and job training for underprivileged youth. The program is named Samuel's Second Chances, a nod to the brother who taught him the importance of forgiveness and connection. Harold feels a profound sense of fulfillment as he witnesses the lives he's able to impact. Alan volunteers to help with the program, seeing it as a way to give back while continuing to heal. Together, he and Harold work closely with the center's team, forming a partnership rooted in shared purpose. Their collaboration strengthens their friendship, proving that even two men from entirely different worlds can find common ground in their desire to make a difference. One crisp autumn evening, Harold hosts a community dinner at the Outreach Center to celebrate the success of Samuel's Second Chances. The event brings together people from all walks of life: children, families, volunteers, and donors. The atmosphere is filled with laughter, music, and gratitude. Alan and Daniel arrive together, their bond now unmistakable. Daniel offers to help with the event, serving food alongside Harold and sharing his story with the attendees. His candidness about his struggles and his journey with his father resonates deeply with the crowd, drawing both admiration and inspiration. Toward the end of the evening, Harold steps onto the small stage to address the attendees. He speaks about the profound lessons he's learned through reconnecting with Samuel's legacy and helping Alan find his son. "This center is a testament to the power of second chances," he says, his voice steady. "But it's also a reminder that it's never too late to open your heart to family, to forgiveness, and to change." The crowd erupts into applause, and Harold feels a sense of peace he hasn't known in years. As he steps off the stage, Alan and Daniel approach him, their smiles warm and genuine. Together, they represent the healing that can come from compassion and perseverance. As the evening winds down, Harold, Alan, and Daniel share a quiet moment together near the community garden outside the Outreach Center. The garden, lush and vibrant, serves as a living symbol of renewal and growth. Harold smiles as he recalls Samuel's love for planting flowers, saying, "He always believed that no matter how harsh the winter, something beautiful would bloom if you just had patience." Alan reflects on how far he's come, both emotionally and physically, since the fateful night he met Harold. "I owe so much to you," he says sincerely. "If you hadn't reached out to me, I don't think I would have ever had the courage to face my past." or my son." Daniel, now visibly more at ease with his father, adds, "And if you hadn't, I might have never gotten to know him the way I do now." He places a hand on Alan's shoulder, their connection stronger than ever. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of friendship and family, the three men realize how their lives have become intertwined. The journey wasn't easy, but the rewards are undeniable. The garden around them seems to echo their transformation, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The months that follow see continued growth and joy for all three men. Alan becomes a regular volunteer at the outreach center, mentoring young people and sharing his story of redemption. His bond with Daniel deepens as they create new traditions together, from fishing trips to game nights. Daniel, inspired by his father's renewed presence in his life, decides to pursue a long-held dream of starting his own coffee shop, with Harold offering to help fund the venture. Harold, too, finds himself transformed. His once empty penthouse now feels like a home, filled with mementos from the outreach center and reminders of his late brother. He hosts monthly dinners for the people he's met through the center, fostering a sense of community he once thought he'd never experience again. The story culminates in a heartfelt gathering at Harold's home, where Alan, Daniel, and several volunteers come together for a Thanksgiving meal. As they sit around the table, Harold raises a glass to toast. "To second chances," he says, "and to the people who remind us that it's never too late to heal, to forgive, and to love." Laughter and gratitude fill the air as the camera pans out, capturing the glow of the gathered group, a family forged not by blood, but by shared journeys of redemption and hope.